fired up when we see the words Ghibli-Inspired for a pretty simple reason. We are inspired by Ghibli. TTRPGs are storytelling engines. We want the blueprints, we want the recipe. This particular recipe is really tough to cook up once you bring it home. Sitting at the plate saying, yeah, this is good, but it needs something. I think that's why, despite the heaps of talent and passion behind $6 million worth of crowdfunded projects, there has yet to be a definitive Ghibli storytelling engine. In search of those missing ingredients, we have to take off our rabid fandom hat and put on our critical analysis cap. I watched 19 hours of movies, 20 hours of documentaries and video essays. I went through 2 pencils down to the nub, taking notes. You already know I broke out the Japanese graphite for this one. And I used those notes to make a worksheet that we can use to Ghiblify our own games. But be warned, seeking to understand how your favorite things are made and what makes them work is an eldritch bargain. We lose some of the mysterious charm that draws us in, but in return, we get the most awesome boon ever. We're able to give these stories to other people. And if that's not the greatest joy of running the game, I don't know what is. I'm not going to talk about which Ghibli-inspired projects I like or dislike, with one exception, which I'll get to later. Instead, we're going to break down what makes something Ghibli-esque. More specifically, Miyazaki-esque. No, not that Miyazaki, goofball. First, I'm going to tell you what is definitely not one of the secret Ghibli herbs and spices, even though it's a word spoken all too often in the same breath as Studio Ghibli. I am an autistic millennial, which means 2 things. 1, self-deprecating ironic humor has done permanent damage to my brain. 2, I have a sign on my back that says, please leverage nostalgia to make me spend money. The sheer amount of dubiously fan-subbed 480p anime that I consumed before Obama's first term
manga and anime
is a physical weight in my brain. And companies know this. They know that it's a viable pathway for nostalgia, a word that I'll define here as a stomachache that can only be treated by spending $40 on a Naruto mug. Look, shadow clones appear when you fill it up. Certainly, some of us are nostalgic for our good old buddy Totoro and how serotonin was still a domestic product of our young brains whenever we first met him. But that's not what's actually making these stories memorable. Companies wish that they could bottle and sell what's actually going on. It's something that nostalgia can only pretend to do. These movies put us in that childlike state of immersion regardless of our age because of something else.
Thanks for the offer, but I'd rather be a pig than a fascist.
Don't mind Drew. This is where he sleeps. If you are an authority figure of any kind in a Ghibli movie, pack it up. Go home. You're embarrassing yourself. The purpose of the state, or even of parents in these movies, is to show just how hard somebody can miss the point of being alive. These grown-ups are preoccupied with greed, nationalism, jealousy, the pursuit of power. And it's all portrayed as genuinely embarrassing behavior. Look at this man. He is menacing a child. Do not invite him into the party. Get out of there. And then he's trying to be all friendly at the end of the movie. No, sir. If we want to add this to our own games, and patrons can get this worksheet at patreon.com/ADHDM in all its resplendent glory, we ask, what are 2 factions that are making the world a less habitable place for the PCs? And what lies do those factions believe about one another that's enabling to act? And what lies do those factions believe about the other that's enabling them to act without compassion? Now, the absence of competent authority does not mean that the characters are going to reject responsibility. In fact, it's the opposite. All of Miyazaki's protagonists are isolated from the world by some solemn duty. Break this curse. Maintain a dying tradition, cut off from everyone you know. Protect a sacred power from corruption. Acknowledge the ugly truth of war. Reconcile that beautiful things can be put to terrible purpose. Or simply discover what it means to live. And none of these characters are really responsible for ending up in those situations. One or more of those goofy-ass authority figures either created these situations or ignored it until it became a huge problem as a result of the unchecked, precious status quo. And that's exactly what it feels like to be a kid. That's a part of why everyone can feel so seen in these movies. We've all felt like if we could just explain, if we could just make the people in charge understand, then they would help us instead of obsessing over keeping things the way that they are. Our first question for the player characters is, what responsibility isolates you from your peers? And then as GMs, we ask ourselves, how do the authority figures in their lives make that responsibility way harder than it has to be? And what's amazing about that is that it enables the #1 emergent narrative in all of tabletop role-playing. You know what's better than one character isolated by their responsibilities? 2 to 5 characters isolated by their responsibilities joining together. It's that isolation that brings the group together. Most character arcs in D&D are about learning what you need to learn out in the world so that you can either assume your place in your backstory once more, or outgrow it entirely. In Ghibli movies, the characters learn about their value and their purpose by helping others, other people who are suffering like they are. The questions we can ask here are, what do the PCs need to accept about the world and about themselves in order to fulfill their responsibility? And this is crucial. What can they learn from each other? And that informs a huge part of the story that's pretty important if we want to run Ghibli James. Ghibli games. If we want to run Ghibli games. I'm sure you've noticed that Ghibli movies don't exactly behave like regular fantasy, or even like most anime. Yeah, we have stakes, we have antagonists, we have adversity, all of that. But whereas fantasy TTRPGs are mostly about defeating opponents so that you can get better at defeating opponents, outside of Laputa, there aren't really any Ghibli conflicts that can be solved by, like, killing a few really evil people. Like, the Witch of the Wastes is an S-tier hater, but by the end of the movie, she's living with Howell and Sophie so that they can take care of her. Any vulgar display of power from anyone is portrayed as a character giving in to the same misguided impulses that make our authority figures so embarrassing. Instead, the conflict that defines our characters is that of maintaining the convictions that they discovered while they were helping others. Now, for our games, what we can ask is what survival information is being imparted by the conflict, and how do the mistakes and triumphs of the NPCs prove that survival information? In the old reliable hero's journey, this is referred to as returning with the elixir. We ride back into the village, we use our newfound knowledge to heal whatever was wrong with the place when we left it. But in a Ghibli movie, we stop just short of that, and we dwell for a moment in something a lot less certain. The parts in a Ghibli movie that have stuck with me forever, that keep growing like a wild garden, even when I'm not thinking about them, are when, for a stretch of silence and stillness, we are just left to expand into that space. It's when the paint of the story is left to dry that it really makes its mark. This is like the second toughest thing from this list to incorporate into a TTRPG, the toughest I saved for last, but it's vital to the formula. With that space, we feel as though the world of the movie will carry on even after the film ends. If you edited all of the negative space out of one of these movies, it would feel shallow. It would feel like an amusement park ride. A lot of the early Buena Vista and Disney dubs did just that, or rather they would add in music and sound effects and dialogue, because God forbid we have even a second of silence, and it feels so cheap. Like putting up wallpaper in a cave, because who would ever want to look at a boring old cave wall? To put this into our games, we just need to ask, how many people need to subscribe to the ADHDM before pencil manufacturers start answering Skylar's emails? What? Who put that in there? Come on. It was supposed to say, when's the last time the party just got to be somewhere? A forest, a lake, a road, a campfire, an airship ride. And it's not just the emptiness that makes everything feel so vibrant. There's a reason that iconic Ghibli locations feel real, even when they're not plausible. The bathhouse in Spirited Away lives rent-free in so many people's heads, because even though it's in a fictional world, it's a real place. The people there work, play, rest, all according to their own will and needs. Each room has a function. Each facility has a system and a set of rules. Each major location has its own soundscape. Together, they make a living thing that lets us just accept it at face value without resorting to a bunch of lame exposition. As a chronic prepper, this is one of those things that can increase in complexity until I burn out, because the task is just going to infinitely build upon itself. Earlier when I mentioned I'd talk about one Ghibli-inspired project, I was thinking of one in particular that handles this aspect of Ghiblification in my favorite way. I've had the pleasure of previewing The Wandering Tavern from Homie and the Dude. The Kickstarter is live right now and until May 9th. It's billed as a Ghibli-inspired tabletop setting set inside of a floating city. And more than that, I think that it's a stunning example of a world that feels like it's going to keep moving without you. It evokes that spirited away sense of otherworldliness. There are bizarre phenomena and rules and characters that are easy to accept at face value because they feel real. And it comes with the biggest set of battle maps I've ever seen. And I think like a jumbo STL to print the whole campaign setting out, which is insane. If you watched my 5 tools video, you already know that I'm a big fan of their other book, Sky Zephyrs. It's my definitive vehicles splat book for 5e. And in a way, The Wandering Tavern is sort of a companion book to that. It works really well alongside it, although they can both work separately on their own. It definitely leans more into the industrial warmth and noise of Spirited Away over expanses of nature, very intentionally. And that intention is woven really neatly into the entire book. It will be the first link in the description. Full disclosure, it's an affiliate link, so only order through it if you want to make me filthy stinkin' rich. The reason I'm talking about The Wandering Tavern at all, when I've turned down collaborations from, let's say, similar projects, is that I think it's fucking cool and I want it to thrive. Homie and the Dude is a completely indie team, and as I've gotten to know them more this year, I am just rooting for them so hard. If you want a damn good campaign setting, click that link down below. This part's gonna get a little intense. If you've gotten this far in the video, you have what you need to run a great game. TTRPGs don't have to be deep. Go have fun. But I want to talk about why it's so hard to channel the inspiration we get from things that impact us so deeply. In the latest Studio Ghibli movie, The Boy and the Heron, an elderly architect of a magical world beseeches our young protagonist Mahito to take these 13 magical blocks and construct a world without malice. Something the old man has been trying to do for basically his whole life, and that life is at its end. Now, I'm not the first one with this take, but when I saw that scene, it turned me upside down, because what I heard was Hayao Miyazaki telling us, the viewers, hey, I don't know how many more of these I got in me. If you want these kinds of stories to stick around, it's up to you. You gotta do it your way, because my way is going with me when I'm gone. What enables any work of art to resonate with us on the deepest level is the intention and emotion and experience of the creators going into that work. It's how we're able to feel so seen, even by stories that don't mirror our experiences. Really great art makes the world feel more connected. It makes the people in that world feel infinitely more precious and important. It's why generative AI is not creatively satisfying to anyone who's ever actually made something, and why everybody's already kind of numb to it. It's a shallow spectacle. And similarly, there's not ever really going to be a storytelling engine out there in the world or in the future that releases this inspiration completely. Akira Toriyama, creator of Dragon Ball and many other things, passed away during the production of this video, and it hit a lot of people, including me, that we cannot take the stories that shape us for granted. If Toriyama taught me how to get back up, how to stand my ground, how to not take myself too seriously, then Miyazaki taught me how to suffer. I might sound insane saying that about everyone's favorite comfort films. These aren't just 90-minute diversions put here to distract us from all of our worries and then be forgotten. These worlds are being ravaged and exploited. They're filled with pain and loss and fear and injustice and that sense of grief that we feel afterwards. So close to nostalgia, but so much more bitter and real, is a grief for a world without malice that we, in this lifetime, will not be able to experience. And yet, somehow, every time, these characters learn how to slow down and dwell in that calm, quiet place that lives inside of us all. They choose vulnerability. They choose joy. Y'all already know that my ADHD autistic brain has a hard time with funerals. And while I was watching movies in preparation for this video, when I found that stillness, I was able to experience genuine, necessary grief for my great-grandma, who passed away last month, who, in her final days, wrote music and poetry expressing joy and gratitude for her failing body. And I know she didn't feel that way constantly, but she found her way there pretty often. And she showed her work, and she left that behind for us, all while she was facing the scariest, most uncertain thing that any of us will ever face. Miyazaki has made no secret of what he thinks is going to happen to the studio when he's gone. And by all accounts, the man is a tyrant, and working on one of his films is exhausting. I cannot envision a world in which somebody steps in to fill his role when he's gone. If I had to guess, Disney or somebody else is gonna step in and buy Ghibli and start pumping out sequels and live action adaptations with no soul or substance whatsoever. If we want these stories to live on, if we want our inspirations to inspire others, to give people a garden in their souls that grows as they grow, we have to contribute that one thing that nobody else can do for us, that nobody can sell us, that no algorithm can create. We have to radically and completely accept who we are right now and put it into the work. That might sound aggressive, maybe even a little scary, but the most Ghibli-inspired thing that we can do right now, in this moment, is make good art. Thank you for watching. Keep your pencils sharp. Show this video to your English teacher, and if you will, just sit here with me for a moment.